The committee report made various recommendations concerning issues which have been the cause of recent industrial action taken by members of the National Tertiary Education Union, that is the NTEU. NTEU members have been striking and picketing over the insecure nature of their employment and the lack of adequate pay increases, being unable to keep pace with inflation, and the fact that they are in fact experiencing chronic work overload. And I want to reiterate my support for university staff around the state who have been striking for better paying conditions, and commend the NTEU who have been fighting for improved conditions and wages. University staff are chronically overworked and need to be paid fairly and have job security with adequate protections. These workers deserve fair pay and conditions. The question is, what can the New South Wales Parliament do? Now, in terms of control and oversight responsibilities of the New South Wales Parliament, and notwithstanding the fact that these universities are by and large federally funded, as my colleague the Honourable Mark Latham just pointed out, I would take members to the report item 1.1, which points out that whilst the government is the main funder of universities in New South Wales, the New South Wales Government nevertheless plays a significant role in oversight, coordination and facilitation of the development of the state's tertiary education sector. This inquiry has investigated the levers that the New South Wales Government could use better to support the transparent operations and public benefit of higher education, as well as issues to advocate within the Australian Government. And it also goes on in 1.2, this is the report, the New South Wales Government is responsible for administering the legislative responsibilities of the state's public universities, as well as ensuring ongoing engagement with the New South Wales Vice-Chancellor's Committee, other states, territories and the Commonwealth on policy and implementation issues. I would also like to inform the House that universities are also the recipients of considerable tax exemptions, and at the state level that includes a legislative exemption for stamp duty, which is expressly exempted in the legislation under which each university operates. For instance, Section 29A of the University of Sydney Act 1989, Section 21A of the University of New South Wales Act 1989, and Section 22A of the University of Technology Sydney Act 1989. Other exemptions arise from the charitable status of universities. Universities are registered charities with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. As I said, transfer duty, that is stamp duty, major tax expenditures, general insurance duty, these are all things they're exempt from, motor vehicle stamp duty, payroll tax, land tax, and parking space levies. Now, at comment 2.31, the report notes that in June 2020, the Treasurer announced the New South Wales Government's Loan Guarantee Scheme, which offers commercial loan guarantees to universities valued at up to a total of $750 million. The Treasurer has stated that universities applying for loan guarantees will be asked to show how they intend to restructure university operations to make them more sustainable. So we have here, Mr President, the New South Wales with both significant legislative responsibility for our universities and a not insignificant cost impost to the state budget in the form of tax and levy exemptions. The problem is we do not have a commensurate line of sight over our universities, and this is one of the issues that the report went to, which I was particularly interested in, given the context I gave before about wage disparities, inequities and lack of transparency over full-time equivalent and the casualisation of the workforce. Now, there is a compelling argument, thus, for direct accountability and oversight by the New South Wales Parliament in a sector which is not only a major employer for New South Wales, but also provides a major source of income, economic growth, and perhaps most importantly, determines the future development of this state and the nation via that most crucial of public goods, that is, higher education. If I could just return now to the matters of concern raised by those employees and their union of the university sector and how the report reflected on these issues. Members in this chamber, and it's been well canvassed over the last few weeks and months and prosecuted by the opposition, members will be aware that the cost of living has skyrocketed, with inflation currently at 5.1%, the highest in 2 decades. Wages have simply not kept pace with inflation. Workers have experienced huge pay cuts as real wages have declined. The average pay rise for university staff across New South Wales has only been 2%. So in effect, they've received a real wage cut of some 3%. Even as we speak today, Western Sydney University staff were on strike for a decent pay rise. The current pay offer out there at the Western Sydney University is 2%. Which is, again, well below the inflation rate of 5.1%. This is at a time when that university has just posted a $143 million surplus, and senior university staff are earning over $1 million salaries. If I could take the House to Committee Report Comment 2.29, and it's worth quoting, the vast disparity between the salaries paid to senior university administrators and the casual and insecure payments made to so many of the staff who actually conduct the teaching and research in universities is a matter of real concern to the committee. If the role of universities is to create new knowledge and disseminate that knowledge to students, then the people who do this critical work need to be valued and respected. The current system that sees university vice-chancellors paid 25 times to 30 times more than many of the people undertaking the core work of universities must be reviewed. And a failure to do this by the governing bodies of the universities is evidence of a failure of leadership. This is a matter that should be reviewed by the Auditor-General. And at 2.22, the report goes on. During his evidence to the committee, Mr Troy Wright, Branch Assistant Secretary of the Community and Public Sector Union New South Wales, contended that the financial crisis experienced by universities has worsened by the federal government's refusal to allow universities to access wage subsidies through the JobKeeper program. The committee notes that private tertiary education providers are eligible for JobKeeper subsidies. In answers to questions on notice, private provider Alpha Crucis advised the committee that as a private organisation and registered charity that experienced a 15% loss in turnover, it was eligible for JobKeeper payments. By the end of August 2020, it had received a JobKeeper subsidy of $2,151,000 for 438 staff. However, Alpha Crucis noted that private providers are not eligible for other government funding supports that universities may indeed be entitled to. And at 2.25, a significant consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the large number of job losses and redundancies in the university sector. The scale of the changes to the employment profiles of universities in New South Wales has focused attention on the disparity between the salaries of senior university administrators and other university staff. Many of the Vice-Chancellors who appeared before the committee declined to provide their salary levels, to the committee on the basis that the data would be publicly available in annual reports. However, Professor Ian Jacobs from University of New South Wales did advise that he earns $1.28 million per annum. Like many senior university administrators, Professor Jacobs is taking a 20% salary reduction to assist with financial management of the pandemic's impact. When asked about his salary, Dr. Michael Spence from the University of Sydney said that the University of Sydney is arguably the highest paying university in Australia in what is on average the highest paying university system in the world. When we're looking at the issue of potential salary reductions for COVID-19, we identified 247 academic staff who were paid more than $250,000 a year, and the 45 administrators who were paid more than $250,000 a year. So there is a lot of mythology around the notion that academics in Australia are underpaid. These are senior academics. In fact, this is a generously paying system. That said, Australian Vice-Chancellors are very generously paid. So you've got the two aspects here, Mr President. You've got the large disparity in wages, where you've got vice-chancellors and senior executive staff getting paid millions of dollars, and people who are actually delivering the academic tuition and the coalface service delivery can't even get a wage increase that keeps up with inflation. Then you've got the spectre of insecure work, where you've got a casualised workforce that was opportunistically used during the pandemic to further outsource work and increase the insecurity of that employment. And at 2.20, the report goes to this. During the inquiry, the committee heard evidence of the increasing levels of insecure employment through casual or contract-based university employment. Dr Cahill from the NTEU argued that universities have been exposed to significant market-based risks, and one of the chief tools they have used to address this risk is to rely increasingly on insecure forms of work. Casual and fixed-term employees now comprise about 2/3 of all university workers. The nature of their employment rights means that they can easily be let go, and indeed, they were the first to lose their employment as universities responded to the onset of the pandemic. As the crisis has continued and deepened, ongoing staff have now had their jobs targeted for redundancy. At present, universities in New South Wales have announced around 1,300 redundancies. Mr President, it's clear from the report that there's a high degree of missing and ambiguous data pertaining to the actual number of casuals in the workforce versus those who are employed full-time. The same can be said in respect of available data on the salary of senior staff. Given the legislative responsibility of the New South Wales Government over universities in New South Wales and the financial relief provided in the state budget, it is imperative that recommendations of the report pertaining to these issues are implemented. There are recommendations which ask for specific reporting and transparency around those issues that I've canvassed. Recommendations 1, 3, 7, 22, 23 go directly to those issues I've highlighted. I want to congratulate those members on the committee for doing an excellent job, and I commend the report to the House.